We are the OpenStack group. My name is Eduardo Urbano.
I'm Hunter Workman. I'm Jason Lee.
And our sponsors were Chris Hodge, Kendall Nelson, and Jeremy Stanley. An overview of what OpenStack is. It is an open source cloud services platform. It's used by hundreds of companies and thousands of individuals worldwide. It includes telecoms, e-commerce, scientists, web services, and enterprise developers. The true power of OpenStack is its large community combined with its four open ethos, which is open source, open design, open development, and open community. The needs and opportunities of OpenStack. OpenStack changes and grows all the time. It's incredibly flexible, constant iteration, and then many users and many platforms. Differing individuals needs require different modules and different tools. And then tool maintenance and deployment. Tool updates and improvements was kind of what we focused on for most of the tools that we worked with, and then technical issues and licensing issues as well. A couple of solutions, solving licensing issues, and then making it easier to make tools. As for example, our biggest project was the Blueprint migration script that we worked on. It was already originally there, but all we did, we integrated some new code, made some big changes to make sure it would output other outputs that needed to be there, and then improving currently existing tools, planning and execution for other projects as well. So the original schedule for this project, we had four main tasks. The first one was to implement a clean room VCS repo implementation. In short, the clean room implementation was, there was a module that was already there. Nobody wanted to deal with the licensing issues, especially if anybody wanted to do some additional work with projects involving that. So we were supposed to re-implement that. Around the midterm, that's what we did, all our work up to that point. And let's see, after that, we were to work on the Blueprint migration script, which we'll explain in a bit here. And after that, some improvements to the RefStack repository, including additions onto the API, wrapping the client in a Docker container. So this is what we actually got done. The VCS implementation we did a lot of research for, and that's what we did around the midterm. It unfortunately got scooped out from under us by somebody else in the community. So we moved on to the Blueprint migration script, which was easier said than done, but because of that, we never did get to the other two things in our original mandate. So, as I mentioned, the scheduling difficulties, the difficulties in maintaining that schedule, we did a lot of research, shared with the community, which led to our original project being scooped out from under us. And the Blueprint migration script, let's see, yeah, I went over this. The proof of concept for the Blueprint migration script, we got that done fairly quickly. The rest of it was various engineering problems and getting together, which took quite some time to solve. So, quick explanation here of what the Blueprint migration script does. OpenStack is a very large foundation with a lot of projects, and their original task tracking tool was called Launchpad. Launchpad is a website that allows you to track your progress and log bugs.
propose and implement features, etc., and so forth. It's very useful um, for large open source projects to get together and get things done. As OpenStack grew larger, it became more useful for them to create storyboard to better fit their needs than Launchpad, as their needs didn't quite mesh up. The community, once they created storyboard, the community created their own script to move their projects from Launchpad. The priority for them was to move the bugs. The second priority that they never got to was the blueprints. The blueprints are a description of plans and features and assignments of who wrote that and who should implement it. In Scrum terms, it's a bit like an item in a project backlog, and moving that information from Launchpad to storyboard was the big problem we were solving, so that big projects could maintain a more coherent history of their project, and get back to maybe some bugs they left a long time ago. Not bugs, features. And here's our demo of what we got done here.
Should I just skip to the demo?
Yeah, how do we play that?
Hello. Here's our demo.
Howdy, this is our demo for our capstone class. We are going to import the blueprints from control here to our instance in storyboard. As you can see, our current project here is called control capstone. The capstone is absolutely empty. And we are going to move all of these blueprints to our new instance here. As you can see, each of these links leads to a different blueprint with its own people attached and information. Just like this. So, what we're going to do is bring up our handy-dandy terminal here, and from there, bring up our current command. Let's see, make sure I spelled it correctly here. From control,
State-of-the-art
capstone.
user interface.
The option to migrate blueprints. In the regular program, we would migrate both blueprints and bugs. I have inserted a command kill to end the program before we get into the bugs, because we don't want to be here all day. Hit enter, let the virtual machine spin up.
The reason we're not doing this live,
And that's the end of the
aside
script.
from hardware problems, is
So
that bit there
first
takes
here,
about 15 minutes. We don't have that.
and here are all the blueprints. Let's see.
Not 15 minutes.
Let's pick one
5.
that should be apparent here. See, this one at the top of the page here was create initial tests for Nova. You can find this one right in the back here. And as you can see, it has the author, David Purcell, the approvers and assignees, and the complete list of data here.
So
We had a lot of difficulties in accomplishing this. So I guess one of the biggest problems was so when we were trying to work with the blueprints, you have to use an API to make those web calls. And it turns out that blueprints were kind of like some side project from one guy who never finished it. So the blueprints in the API just returned nothing no matter what you did. That took a while to figure out that we actually had to use the developer version of the API in order to actually get the calls to work to get blueprint information. And from that, it turns out that you can't even get all the data that we wanted from the API. So we had to turn into web scraping and just taking the page and stripping out what we need and using it that way, which worked pretty well and it's great. There was also, we had a lot of issues with just figuring out the right information and how things worked, and there never seemed to be enough documentation for what we wanted, even though there was still tons. And we ended up finding out that really the best way to figure things out was just to hunt down people who had worked for these projects and just talk to them. So yeah, Postmortem, really just have to sit down and work it out, figure things out, and knowing what you're working with is really important, and there's going to be other people who just know more about it than you do. And, you know, take notes, figure things out, pretty much. So, next, there's some more testing that we could be doing. There's some fringe cases that might, you know, still mess up and have better exception handling and stuff like that. We tested it on some really big projects and those seem to go through fine, but you know, there's always more bugs.
Yeah, the problem with testing with really big projects is that it takes a really long time. So if you can't test more projects, you can't find weird use cases that make the thing crash. So I would like to.
By a long time, we mean like half a day. So, and then after that, pretty much just need to wait on approval and create documentation so that it can be pushed out into production. Any questions?
Was used for web scraping.
Beautiful soup. It's magical. When I first tried looking up web scraping, the first thing I tried was just raw LXML. I would not recommend that at all. So, Python, beautiful soup.
Beautiful soup is great.
We were going to scrape the entirety of the project and of the project's pages, and then upload it that way. Thankfully, we saved a lot of time by finding out that the development version of the API solves most of the problems, but we still wound up using web scraping for to get the unique names for each blueprint, which we needed to get them all.
The whole OpenStack community is huge, but are there like thousands of these blueprint things to be transferred? Are there a lot that aren't active anymore? You know, is there a lot of background that really is waiting to be moved?
Yes. The sample project that we did this for was the one we did in the demo was Patrol. There are several other projects that are been with OpenStack from the beginning, like Neutron, which was the big one that we tested, has 864 blueprints that they would have to migrate, and then there's other projects like Keystone and what was another one? But Keystone is almost as large as Neutron, and there's dozens of other projects where they would like to move their stuff over.
And to add to that, we do want the ones that are closed or old just for historical purposes.
Yeah, we get it all. Yes.
I guess just curious, what part takes so long in the process? Like, what takes so long to complete? Like, which part of it? You said some of them take 3 hours or 15 minutes or half a day. I guess. Like, what causes it to take so long?
Just getting the blueprints takes. Doesn't take more than maybe 30 to 45 minutes for the largest projects. But the script in totality to make sure that we didn't break anything also imports the bugs. The bugs are huge. Like, there's a description of the bug, then it imports all the user data and all the conversation around the bugs. So I remember when I tried this with Neutron, there was one bug with 270 odd comments from like 10 different people, and that's just one bug of about close to like 4,000 or something, and most conversations aren't that big. They're like 4 comments, but just getting all of that together to make sure that the entire script runs, that takes forever.
Yeah, and then it has to make a lot of API calls to first get a lot of the information, and then after that, it has to do equally amount of API calls to write them to a different web page, and API calls just take longer than programmatic calls.
So is there some reason not, I'm assuming Blueprint was also open source, is there some reason not to just take that and complete the missing functionality to make the export functionality work in totality?
I guess we could have. I think we didn't look too much into it because Launchpad kind of has their own foundation, but we might have been able to track down some people and see if we could have figured it out. But web scraping just seemed like the short solution.
Yeah, it kind of would have doubled the complexity of like the number of people we need to talk to figure out how does this work.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. We would have had to learn the entire Launchpad API tool in order to modify it. That would take a long time. That thing is huge.
Yes.